This portion of Money Matters Boston is brought to you by Flagship Wealth Management. Money Matters is taking its show on the road. We're up in New Hampshire at St. Anselm's College at the New Hampshire Institute of Politics, and we are lucky to be joined by former U.S. Comptroller of the United States and the CEO of the Comeback America Initiative, David Walker. Thanks for joining us on the program.
Good to be with you, Chuck.
Well, we're up here for a reason. The 10 million a minute bus tour is taking off. What exactly does that mean?
Well, what we're doing is we're going to swing states at a time that matters on a critically important issue. What 10 million a minute means is if you look at our total liabilities and unfunded promises for pensions, health care, Social Security, Medicare, they're $70 trillion and growing by 10 million a minute. So this national debt clock that everybody talks about, it lowballs the problem.
Yeah. Now, obviously, it's no coincidence we're here in New Hampshire. It's the cradle of politics. This weekend, I think you may have said it, this is the first time that both presidential candidates are in New Hampshire at one time, Romney and Obama. So New Hampshire is on people's minds.
Absolutely. Today is the first time, my understanding in history, that the two major presidential candidates have been in the state on the same day. Of course, we're here today, too. I can guarantee you people will get more substance and solutions from our event.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, David, you mentioned the 70 trillion, and we keep hearing 16 trillion. I think it just happened during the Democratic National Convention. What is that 16 trillion versus the 70 trillion? Help us out.
Good question, Dave. Well, first, in 2000, we had 5.6 trillion in total debt, which is what the 16 is. It's gone from 5.6 to 16. That's total debt held by the public and debt owed to Social Security and Medicare, all right? But as I said, that's a small part of the problem because during that same period of time, we've gone from 20 trillion in unfunded obligations and liabilities to 70.
Now, the burden barometer and the debt clock, you have been coming out saying that there's a big difference between the two, and I know that's going to be a fundamental theme throughout the bus tour. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure. There's about a $54 trillion difference. I would call that material as a CPA.
Bit of a difference, yeah.
You know, as I said, the national debt clock is 16 trillion. That's public debt and debt owed to Social Security and Medicare. But the burden barometer includes the unfunded promises for Medicare, the unfunded promises for Social Security, the unfunded promises for civilian and military pensions and retiree health care, and a range of other commitments and contingencies that the federal government has entered into that don't represent deficits and debt today, but they will in the future if we don't change course.
Well, David, you mentioned, I mean, I read a study that said it was 130,000 per family on the 16 trillion that was owed, that's what the family owed. Can you explain to our viewers how this is going to affect them? I think with the day-to-day and what have you, they hear 130, that's a big number, but they move on. How is that going to affect the household?
Well, it's actually well more than 130. It's, you know, almost a quarter of a million per household. You know, here's the key. You know, what's happening right now is that we are mortgaging the future of our kids and grandkids at record rates. The budget is out of control. More and more is going for consumption, less and less for investment. So we're cutting investments, including in our children's future, at a time that they're going to face a lot tougher competition. That is irresponsible, that is immoral, that is unacceptable and must stop. Now, keep in mind that deficits and debt represent deferred taxes absent a change in course. And you've heard the old story, don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the guy behind the tree. Well, the new story is don't tax you, don't tax me, tax the baby on your knee.
There you go. Now, I know that this, you know, this bus tour, as it's kicking off, has a lot of influential people involved, more than just yourself. Is there any other folks that you can, you know, key our audience into who is involved in this project?
Well, there's a number of people that are supporting the project. Two former chairmen of the Democratic National Committee, Ed Rendell and Roy Romer. Two former chairmen of the Republican National Committee, Bill Brock and Mel Martinez. The two living former chairmen of the Federal Reserve, Alan Greenspan and Paul Volcker. H. Ross Perot Sr., who ran for president 20 years ago, largely on this issue. Just a number of people across the political spectrum, a wide range of ideology, because they know we have a serious problem. And they know that the American people need to hear substance and solutions from the candidates so that whichever presidential candidate wins, they will have a mandate to act.
Well, let me put you on the spot, because you are in the middle here for a reason. I mean, you've been known as you know, somebody that is independent, you know, sort of middle ground. And you know, maybe I'm going to ask you for some commentary, like it's NFL football coverage, on how the election is going. I mean, are the issues, you know, what we are supposed to be talking about right now, and who do you think is representing your initiative at best?
Well, first, We are nonpartisan, we are non-ideological, we are non-personal. We don't endorse candidates, we're not, we're not advocating a particular candidate or against a particular candidate. The good news is that one of the things that we've been fighting for is to make sure that the economy, jobs, and fiscal responsibility are the top issue in the election. I believe it will be. But that doesn't mean that it's going to be dealt with in a substantive and solutions-oriented fashion. So far, what we're hearing is a lot of slogans, a lot of spin, a lot of mudslinging, and that's got to change. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to educate the public so they can be more informed and try to push the candidates for more solutions. And frankly, so the media can too. The media has not been doing its job in this regard,
well, David,
and that's got to change.
Just say, David, each and every week on this show, Chuck and I talk about the fiscal cliff and how that's happening January 1. You've brought both sides of the table together on this tour. Can that get done, in your opinion, by January 1 to fix the fiscal cliff, or at least kick that can down the road until something gets resolved?
Well, the fiscal cliff, as you know, is the combination of the expiration of a range of tax cuts, including the so-called Bush tax cuts, as well as the schedule across the board spending cuts, defense and otherwise, that are supposed to take place. And there's a broad-based consensus that we can't allow that to happen if we want to avoid going back to recession. So realistically, what's going to happen is that some things they won't extend, other things they'll modify, but most things they will extend.
Does that happen in December?
That probably happens in December, before the end of the year, but the big decisions won't be made until 2013. I think they'll extend most of this for maybe 9 months, and in the anticipation that they'll get a grand bargain. Social insurance reforms, comprehensive tax reform, defense and other spending reductions.
But we're relying a lot on the results of the election and whether or not these things are going to be dealt with, don't you think? I mean, it's been pretty clear that President Obama doesn't seem to be wanting these cuts to be extended, and from my viewpoint.
Well, there's a political game going on right now, and obviously the result of the election will have an impact. We don't know who the next president's going to be, whether President Obama is going to be reelected or not. It's pretty clear that the Republicans are going to keep control of the House, maybe by a somewhat less margin. It's less clear about who's going to control the Senate. It could really go either way. I mean, most odds makers say the Republicans will probably pick it up maybe by a seat or two, but we don't know. It's too early to tell. Bottom line is this: there's not a question about whether or not we're going to deal with it. It's only a question of when and how. And even if for some reason we went over the fiscal cliff, ultimately they're going to end up having to retroactively take certain actions. It's good to do things retroactively that are positive, and that may be necessary, but I think we can avoid that, and I hope we will.
All right, when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about the book, The Comeback America Initiative, written by David Walker. Hang with us. We'll take a short break. We'll be right back.